Hello, social studies scholars. Mrs. Olson here. We are continuing our lessons on the Bill of Rights. And we've been talking about the very First Amendment because there are different parts to the First Amendment. So we are breaking them down and we are going to continue with a few more elements of the First Amendment for the Bill of Rights. So let's begin with our learning target, which reads that you will be able to understand the principles established in the Bill of Rights. All right, social studies scholars, make sure that you have a pen and paper ready to go so that you can record important information, or to take notes, you can have another window open with a word processing document, and you can take notes that way. All right, here we go with the first part. So we are going to go over how the First Amendment is written in the Bill of Rights to refresh our memories. So the way that it is written exactly, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. These two, the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech, is what our last lessons were about, okay? And so now we are going to go on to this part. It says, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay, so we have seen this several times now, and let's dive into it and see what we can understand. Okay, so here we go with freedom of the press. Now, let's break down what the press means. Well, the press can mean a lot of different things. You can consider the press being in the form of books. It can be in the form of magazines. I don't have a picture of a magazine here, but it can be in the form of newspapers. It can be things on TV. So all of these different examples can all be considered the press. So, this note reads, reporters and editors can criticize the government without risk of punishment. So, in the United States, we can write pretty much anything that we want to, including criticizing the government. And even if we don't agree with the government cannot punish us for writing things about them that they may not necessarily like, because that is a freedom of the press. It is protected by the First Amendment in the Constitution, or in the Bill of Rights, rather. Okay, now what we're not allowed to do with the freedom of the press is to tell lies. We're not allowed to say things that are not true about the government that can get us into trouble. Okay, so we're allowed to say lots and lots of things, even if people don't like it necessarily, but we cannot tell lies. That's actually a good thing to live by, huh? Not telling lies. Okay, so here are our examples. It says newspapers, magazines, books, TV, and movie scripts. They don't have to be inspected by the government before they are published. So the reason why I am including this in here is to hopefully clue you in as to how some other governments around the world operate. There are some countries that their government, everything has to be run by them, and if that government doesn't like what is said in a book or a newspaper or even put on their TV shows, then they can't run it. People can't watch it because the government doesn't like it. But in the United States, because of freedom of the press, we're allowed to do that. But remember, you can't intend to harm somebody and you can't tell lies. All right, we're going to go to the next slide. So if you need a little bit more time, make sure that you pause the video so that you can get the information down. Okay? So continuing with freedom of the press, It makes it possible for Americans to keep informed about what's going on in the government. Sometimes our leaders don't necessarily like us to know what they think or what's going on, and it's okay for us to ask questions and to get answers to those questions. Okay. Freedom of the press also helps us to be responsible citizens, because if we know what's going on, we pay attention, we read the newspaper, we watch the news, we have questions, if we have questions and we get answers to those questions, this helps us to be responsible citizens for when we go to vote, for when we talk to lawmakers, and even when we talk to each other about what is happening in our country. Okay, so here are some pictures that represent freedom of the press. Here is the front page of the newspaper in this political cartoon, and we have the Statue of Liberty holding the newspaper up high. And that's kind of an important part of this cartoon, holding the newspaper up high, saying freedom of the press is important. Okay, and this one is like a whole bunch of reporters' hands. They have microphones, they have pens, they have voice recorders, they have phones with voice memo abilities on them, right? Gathering information, asking the questions, writing the articles, giving us our stories about what's going on in our country. Okay, so the second one that we're going to talk about in this lesson is freedom of assembly. Freedom of assembly. So when you assemble, you put something together, right? So we're talking about people assembling. People meeting together in groups, forming an assembly of people. Okay, so Americans can participate in any group that we want. As U.S. citizens, we can be part of any group, all groups, 10 groups, no groups, any club, organization, anything that we want to join, we're allowed to join it, okay? That's what this freedom of assembly is all about. So the examples that I gave were clubs, political parties, different gatherings. There isn't anything that's against the law, for example, if you want to join it, okay? So this includes groups that do not have popular views, and I'm going to give you an example of that in a moment, okay? So here we have people assembling, there we go, assembling, forming groups, coming together, okay? And here is another one. So this is what I mean. We are allowed to assemble as a group of people, as long as we're not hurting others or hurting the government, pointing guns or any kind of weapons at police. So see these guys? These guys, if you notice, they don't have guns, they don't have knives, they don't have bats, they don't have anything like that. A lot of them are sitting down on the ground. This person even has their hands up, and this actually isn't in America. This is in a different country, and this government doesn't like these guys coming together and protesting. That's what these guys are doing. They were protesting against the government. But in the United States, we're allowed to do that, and in fact, we even have like police protection in order to assemble. Yeah, so if you're part of a group maybe that not everybody agrees with, and you schedule with the city to say have a parade, there will be a police presence to make sure that your group is safe. Okay. And here's what I mean by a group having unpopular views. If you've never heard of the KKK before, that's what this person represents. It stands for the Ku Klux Klan. And the Ku Klux Klan is a group of white supremacists, and they don't like any kind of people of color. They have I would say they have racial attitudes and viewpoints against people who have different color of skin besides white skin. So, while that may be unpopular with most of us, it isn't illegal to be part of the KKK. Yeah. So that's the example that I wanted to give you as far as being allowed to be in a group that has unpopular views. As long as you're not hurting anybody or you intend to lie about them, intend to hurt them, then you're allowed to be part of that group. Okay. So more stuff on freedom of assembly. Here it is. By sharing common interests, Americans can learn to work together. That's part of the reason why we have this freedom to assemble. Because when people come together and they share ideas, there are a lot of good things that can come out of it. Okay, so we can join different groups, like groups that promote animal rights or conservation, like saving the earth, saving trees, saving water, those types of things. We can join groups that protest against government intervention. Let's say that you don't like the government sending our military to the Middle East or even to places like Syria. Then we're allowed to form groups and stand on the front steps of the Capitol and say, we want our troops pulled out. We're allowed to do that, okay? And then there are groups that are devoted to the interests of young people. So maybe some of you guys are in like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or 4-H. Okay, so there are lots of different kinds of groups that we're allowed to join in the United States, and those groups are protected by the freedom of assembly. And remember that even if your ideas are not popular or accepted, it's still okay to form those groups, and you cannot be thrown in jail for being part of a group that either the government doesn't like or most people don't like. All right, so I've got a couple of pictures to end this lesson with, and oh, there's that little one. Okay, and so here we have PETA, People Against People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. That's what PETA stands for. And you can see that these guys are in San Francisco, and they are protesting against people using actual fur, say like in clothing. Okay, so this is a group that is protesting. The government shutdown was at the beginning of 2019, and these guys are protesting against the government, saying, hey, we need to be paid. We are federal workers. Stop the shutdown, okay? So they are using their right to assemble as a group and tell their government, the U.S. government, exactly what they want and what they think. Okay, and our last one, you can join groups like kid groups, like the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts or 4-H. And all of these types of groups have commonalities. People have things in common, things that are similar. And when you get groups of people together that are doing positive things and talking and sharing ideas, there are many good things that can come out of our right to assemble. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this lesson and you learned more about the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. Bye.